To wrap up day one of the AI Plus Expo on Central Stage, and to discuss the future of AI and national security in the new and evolving landscape of conflict, please welcome the Honorable Christopher Miller, former Acting Secretary of Defense, and Dr. Anshuman Roy, founder and CEO of Rhombus Power. This conversation will be moderated by Andrew Sollinger, CEO of Foreign Policy Magazine.
And you, right here.
Oh.
Let's get close
I'm all
and comfortable.
cleaned up,
Let's
man.
be intimate.
Doctor, I'm telling you, man.
Okay, hello everyone. Happy afternoon. Hello. We should talk about something new. How about AI? Would that be interesting to chat about AI? We'll do that right now. So this is, I promise, a fascinating discussion. Very excited about it. Thrilled to be here with Chris Miller. Thanks so much for joining. And Anshu Roy, founder of Rhombus Power. Two very smart individuals that are going to help us talk about predictive intelligence, how we can use that, and how that can be best deployed in our NatSec infrastructure. And as we know, there is a lot that's changing with AI, and it's changing mission planning, intelligence, and deterrence. And what we want to talk about right now is a little bit how public and private partnerships can help and change the game there. So we're going to dive right into that and talk about that for the next half hour. So
don't you think it should be private-public partnership?
It should be private-public.
We always get this backwards. And here we're in D.C. where everybody thinks the public is the key thing. No, we're going to transform this thing with him in private sector, baby. Come on, let's go there. Stop.
Said by a guy who's formerly in the public, now in the private.
Yeah.
No, I think you're quite right.
Yeah,
Let's do
seriously.
that. Let's turn it on its head. Private-public partnerships. So Chris, let's start with you. You have led operations in highly fluid environments. From a command perspective, how can AI be integrated into the decision-making process without slowing things down, but at the same time retaining that human element?
Andrew, first off, we have to talk about Foreign Policy Magazine. Anybody used to read Foreign Policy Magazine when it was hard copy? I used to go, I know you're digital now, but I miss like going to the Barnes & Noble, Borders back in the day, shows my age, and having a hard copy. And every time I got that, I felt smarter, even if I didn't even read it.
It was also long and thin, so it could fit in a gentleman's jacket pocket.
Yeah, but
Thanks, Chris.
thanks for having us and hosting. Quite simply, there's nothing new under the sun in national security, although, Anshu, I'm going to use books to emphasize my point. What we need from you is we need Ender's Game, baby. You're doing it already, but the power, and we're not there yet, right? We're using AI right now. Oh, we can find greater efficiencies in our logistics, process. That's important, don't get me wrong. But where I want to go, and I know you're going there, is I want to be able to have those kids that are out planning and preparing operations be able to run 1,000 iterations in an afternoon as they can bring in all the data they need. But here's the thing, and here's my punchline. No matter what technology does, it all comes back to Mr. Clausewitz, right? Like, you can say whatever you want, but at the end of the day, no matter what technology does, it comes down to fog, friction, fear, and violence. That's war. And no matter what you do with technology, you're never going to wring that out of the war-fighting business. Now, if I could just briefly, I had this great opportunity. I was at the National Security Council. It was in 1718, and Al-Qaeda and ISIS were really developing online presence, which was unbelievable. So we had this big working group where we were talking through, like, how do we counter them? And they talked about hashtags, or they talked about hashes. So I go into this meeting, and with all these extremely, best-in-class industry people, computer scientists par excellence, and I started talking about hashtags. And you could just see him looking at me like, this guy is a moron. So I want to share with you something that you need to think about as you interact with government, with strategists, and particularly with the military. There was an article there was an article recently, I think it was in the Journal, it should have been in Foreign Policy,
It should have.
where it was a thoughtful person, very intelligent, a technologist that talked about the changing nature of war. Here's my point for you that I want you to take away from this, from my portion of this discussion. The nature of war never changes. The nature of war, and I know it sounds geeky, right? But hashtag versus hashes, right? I was the moron that was talking about hashtags. When you're talking to national security professionals, they do not talk about the changing nature of war. You can talk about transformation of war, what we're seeing right now. The character of war always changes. Long bowmen, bow archers at Agincourt. We saw, you think about Napoleon creating artillery. You think about Civil War, telegraph along with railroads. You think about World War I, aircraft, as well as the dawn of the tank. Then you go forward to World War II. What do you get there? Obviously, we get nuclear power, explosions. But more importantly, what you really got out of that, you got radios and was the primary mode change, as well as everybody being in a vehicle for the first time. No animal flesh. Well, if you're in the Germans or Russians, they still had a lot of animals. But if you were in the American Army, it was the first time in the history of the world that every single fighting person was on a vehicle. We go forward to Vietnam and our generation, global positioning systems, night vision goggles. That's changing character of war. That's the transformation of war. But always, 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 the fundamental nature of war doesn't change. So that's why when we have these conversations, that's my little foot stomp for you. When you're talking to national security professionals, don't talk about the changing nature of war. Because no matter what happens, no matter what we do with technology, it's going to be a 17-year-old kid that's going to be using this technology in the middle of the night, freezing to death, in the rain or the sleet, scared out of his mind, hasn't slept in 3 days, probably has a GED, might not even have a high school degree. So when we talk about these subjects, we really have to be aware of the nature of war and the people that will be using it. Thank you, sir.
So if you weren't in the back able to see the book, it was Clausewitz on War, and it sounds like Chris is ready to do the postscript on this right now. I like that very much. I asked him what was in the bag. He wouldn't tell me, so we're going to find out together what's going on here. Anshu, over to you. Your work focuses on anticipatory intelligence. Right. You actually wrote for Foreign Policy a couple of years ago with Stanley McChrystal a little bit about how a year in advance the Russia war was predictable. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about anticipatory intelligence. What is it, and why was that predictable?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. First of all, it's great to be here, and especially with Chris. It's been great, especially knowing your background in the DoD and just your how rooted you are and how close you've been to warfare for most of your life. It's just an honor, so thank you very much. What we did in 2023, when we published in Foreign Policy, was the outcome of about 2 years of effort that we were engaged in commercially. And there are patterns that countries tend to follow when you view them at scale, and if you have the ability to do that at scale across the board, every single military relevant location, across domains, cyberspace, information domains, if you can combine all of that in the right way, then the patterns are, you can identify them as humans. You can accelerate the identification of those patterns with machines, and therefore you realize that no military, of course, as he said, the nature of war never changes. No military can operate without exercising, without practicing, without having some patterns of behavior. And those are discernible, identifiable, and expressible in ways that can be helpful for national security. So that's fundamentally what we did. with Russia, it was obvious. It's all in your magazine, Andrew. There were logistics sites that were showing over 300% increase in activity a year ahead of the actual invasion. There were facilities that were seeing objects come in that were not going to go back, including in Belarus and other places. The spending patterns of soldiers were changing, and we were observing all of that. And when you combine all of that and you stay away from, for just a second, trying to guess Putin's mind, which is important, surely, but just stay away from that for a second and just look at the objective truth within the data of what behavior they're engaging in, and then compare that very logically with what they did in Georgia, in Syria, and in Crimea, then you can come up with the mathematics for how long it will be before they invade, and that's exactly what we did, and it turned out that we were correct.
Outstanding. And what lessons emerge from that experience, that example, and many others since then as well that you could take, that this is an important element of the defense apparatus?
Well, the first lesson is that 30 days of warning is not enough, apparently. I mean, obviously. There is the element of what artificial intelligence can help us do in terms of predictions, but then there is a very human aspect of organizations that are stacked up in certain ways and through which all of that information has to flow, and they are, frankly, they are, I think, relics of the industrial age. And it'll take a little while before that transformation happens, so we need to do better. We need to anticipate even earlier in order for that information to get to the right place at the right time.
Great.
But some of that we've seen change, Andrew, in the last few months. We've seen change happen.
Let's talk a little bit about that. How can we incorporate some of these new tools more effectively into the decisioning apparatus? What are the most effective ways to close that gap between talking about this and actually deploying that intelligence and that predictive capability?
How do you answer this question without sounding critical about our own national security apparatus?
We could take this over to Chris.
Yes,
if you want to tackle that one first.
I was going to go with lessons learned. My takeaway was you can have perfect intelligence and insight into what the enemy's going to do, but since war is such a profoundly human-centric effort, which you noted, even with that, there's still a political context that the Russians still invaded and took over a third of Ukraine. So even with just this perfect insight, it ultimately comes down to these other elements. But I love what we are able to do now, and that's not like a political, it sounds like a political statement what I said. I'm bipartisan about national security, but because that's just the way we make decisions.
So what can we do to accelerate adoption inside the Pentagon without triggering bureaucratic inertia?
I'm a heretic here, and go figure.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got to flip this. We got to flip this whole thing on its head. And those of you that have been out in the field with the men and women that are protecting us, that serve us, know that they have enormous common sense. And any solution that's coming out of D.C., I had heard the DARPA deputy director, fantastic pitch. And he goes, there's some technologies that you have to be top-down driven. We're here honoring, Dr. Ash Carter, and that was really significant. When we're talking about huge muscle movements, yes, but really so many of these technologies that we're talking about as we transition from wars going from the exquisite, small in number, high quality, we're reverting back to the power of the defense, and quantity is better than quality. And the kids in the field are absolutely enormously genius, and if you give them something, if you give them the resources, they're going to figure it out. So what I want to see is there are about 400 units of action in your Department of Defense, in our military. That means an organization about 400 to 500 people, battalion, squadron. These are the things that they're the elements that fight. Tell you what, last time I checked, Ford-class aircraft carrier, $14 billion with a B. F-35, $2 trillion over the life of the program. $2 trillion, the most expensive defense procurement in the history of the world. Think about that. The Roman roads cost less in inflation-adjusted dollars, and we still drive on the Roman roads when you're outside London. I want to take that money and I want to give it down to the kids in the field. And hey, we're going to waste some of it, but everybody talks about we need to have a culture of innovation. What better way to do it than to give these people money, a mission, and if they screw it up, if they could say like, hey, this is why I did this stupid thing, it didn't work out, and you're like, makes sense. No, if they waste, fraud, abuse, that's a good measure. Incentive structure, kick them out. We don't need them in the military. So I want to flip it on its head, Andrew.
So we were talking about this a little earlier with the audacious Ukraine drone attack in Russia over the weekend, and how in Ukraine we have garages that are turning out more drones in a day than we can turn out in a month right now. So that is proof positive of what you're talking about, that tenacity, that audacious tenacity, born of necessity to try and build that out. Let's talk about some hypotheticals, if we could. And I want to, first of all, talk about the competitive environment right now and your perspective on that. So, Anshu, and both of you should answer this if you could, but Anshu, we can start with you. We've written about the convergence of the axis of disruptors, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and their potential to weaponize emerging technologies. I'm wondering, if you could share with us what the risks are of these adversaries adopting predictive AI for C2, for command and control and decision making faster than we do.
All right, I'll give you a chance to think because I have a book I have to show off.
Yeah, no.
This dude owes me money, and I met him once. This book, like, I read way too much because, as I said at the start, like, there's no original thought required, right, when we're talking about warfare. This book's called War About 1.0, AI Goes to War. This book, and it's like one of these self-published ones that some wacky publisher did, and it taught, this book is, for me, I've got to like have examples of how this will actually work in combat. This book's the one, and really in summary, it comes down to algorithmic warfare, and this could be complete, like, I don't want to get into some weird, our system's better than their system, but at the end, a freely created AI will incorporate the ethos of those that are building it versus a closed system with the Chinese Communist Party. I don't know if that's true or not, because we're so terrified right now. Oh my gosh, the CCP is, stealing a march on us. But that's really what's caused me to think a lot, Andrew, is like, what's this going to look like? Because in closing, for me at least, because everybody's like, stop talking, Chris.
No.
Winners, the way you win is not by going into the war with the best equipment. That helps, believe me. It's how fast you can innovate. It's John Boyd's OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act, reassess. So whoever can more rapidly iterate, which is why I love your platform, man. I mean, we've got something there. I couldn't figure out software-centric warfare. There was just this big paper, all these muckety-mucks, we had a national council on software-centric warfare. I was like, what in the hell is that, I get it now. What it really means is how to iterate once the enemy responds to your action. You now know what their limitations and their vulnerabilities are and how you can upload faster than they can.
It used to be logistics. Now it's AI. And Anshu, just a same question, but maybe just to kind of iterate off of what Chris was just saying, everyone in a panic. How close are our competitors to having this kind of capability? How worried should we be?
Well, there's no sure way to know how close they are relative to where we are. But if one applies just common sense, I think it would be obvious that it only takes a small group of very committed people to do crazy things. And I think Rhombus is a living example of that.
A small group of crazy people?
Yes, what began as just curiosity turned into business with some very serious people who took things very seriously, and soon enough, we became very serious people who did very serious things. And so I think that's also a mark of what America is all about, which is there is no country like this when it comes to the innovative spirit that exists here. But as far as our adversaries are concerned, I do think that capabilities, we are a little bit, I work in many countries. We have businesses in many countries. We have companies in many countries. And I get to watch things very closely over there. And what I realize is that there's a certain level of complacence about how advanced we really are technologically. We may be, yes, but we won't be for very long. Not at the pace we are going.
Okay.
And that, I think, is a reminder that soon enough, someone in an adversarial nation could have a capability like ours, where they can see every single pattern of behavior that down to a citizen. Because, you know, in the US, did you know it is so easy to buy ad tech data and get inside your pockets, so to speak? It's called targeted marketing or ads. I mean, what's the difference between targeted ads and targeting, really? Not much. So, but try to do that in China. Try to get data for Chinese cell phones, and you will be hard-pressed to find it. And that speaks volumes for what adversaries can do to us. I think they are close.
Great. Chris, let's go back to the DoD.
I'm leaning in right now.
You're leaning in. There's another book coming. I sense it. Let's imagine a future crisis in the Indo-Pacific or the Mideast. What will AI-enabled decision support look like in the Situation Room?
Like right now, or what it should look like?
Okay. What should it look like in this future crisis?
Wow, that wasn't on the read-ahead question, so now I have to like actually
No
answer
book?
using. Well, yeah, I've got the book, the Ranger Handbook, baby. If you understand this, you there, baby? Come on. All right. What it should look like is Anshuman and Rhombus are doing great work on intelligence analysis needs to be automated. Let's be clear. Like, you can get your correct formats. This isn't a data like labeling problem. We have the data the way it's supposed to look. We need to take our analysts, like these brilliant kids, right? You're not supposed to call them kids, but I'm old now. And we have them like reading sometimes 1,000 reports a day and then having to put it all together and write a couple paragraphs. I don't know, man. I don't think we need to do that anymore. I think like a lot of the press now, like sports stories are automatically generated. Like, oh, we got the box score. We can write a story. We can do that. So we need to get human beings and their cognitive. The most important weapon system is 6 inches between the ears of our fighting people and our analysts. But when we get in there, what we really need in the Situation Room is we need to have been able to run a lot of scenarios. Right now we do course of action development, 3 courses of action, blah, blah, blah. There has to be a way to take those courses of action and run them against historical norms, geography, weather, all the stuff that you forgot more about than I'll ever know. So when decision makers come in, they're not deciding on a course of action based on, well, I read a lot of books. It's based on data and it's based on facts, kind of what you said starting out.
So analogous to that's going to be a little bit of a leap from where we are right now. How do you build trust with senior government leaders so that they allow that AI to augment that decision-making process? What needs to happen to bridge that gap, rather than defaulting to legacy processes?
Well, I mean, trust is built through performance. And so I think what needs to happen is, in peacetime, we need to take these capabilities very seriously, and we need to change the organizational structure of how information flows to the top so that we are able to actually deliver the kinds of insights that are at least our system provides and many others, I'm sure, and then they can decide whether it's working for them or not. Some proof of that already is developing in multiple other places across enterprises, and so I think that is the way to address the trust issue. And you cannot trust any system completely, obviously, so you need to know the bounds of what you are going to trust. And that's where I think it becomes important to be intellectually very honest about what a capability can truly do versus what it cannot. And I think that will earn trust.
Okay, great. Another question for both of you. There's been a lot of discussion recently, less so in this room, in this environment, about concerns, risks. Who is responsible for setting norms with the use of AI in warfare?
Oh.
Chris.
Leadership. Can I change? Can I frequency hop for a moment? I used to live in Army bases when the kids were young, and the artillery training range was right behind our house. It was like really obnoxious, and I used to always tell my wife, like, that's the sound of freedom. That's the sound of freedom. No, man, I was like, man, that's obnoxious as hell. And then I was like, no, that's the sound of freedom. It's not 155 millimeter rounds crashing into your backyard. It's that right now.
I think 155 millimeter rounds are more soothing, actually, than that.
Yeah, that's crazy how things have changed in the last couple of years. Like really the transformation of war, which really I think is the subject of your question.
Yes.
Is I don't want to. You don't want to like be the Debbie Downer about the current generation of leadership doesn't get it. I think they do get it, but we have to have a real paradigm shift in the things that we embrace and we incentivize. And for example, right now our warfighting concept, that's the thing that generates all of what you do and many people here. The capabilities that you develop. Oftentimes now people are developing on their own, which I think is great, although there's no incentive to do that in the Department of Defense procurement system, but that's another issue that's been belabored to death. All we're trying to do is refight World War II in the Pacific with more technology. That's not the answer. We've got to have I was just tap dancing. Here's the answer to your question.
Thanks.
We have got to embrace the young leaders who are digital natives that understand this at the tactile level, as opposed to people like me, not you, you're like a doctor and stuff. But instead of white-haired people like me that are running the department or running the military services or senior levels, leaders, we've really got to incentivize bottom up.
Great. And Anshu, same question for you.
What was the question?
So the question was, who should set the norms for AI in warfare and national security, or should there be norms?
I think some definition of boundaries are important, I think. One should be careful about who they select. The government in general should be careful about who they select to build the capabilities, because their ethos will transfer, like Chris was talking about, into AI is also nothing magical other than it's a bunch of code, and so someone has to write it in the end, right? So it's creating those frameworks responsibly is necessary, I believe, and ensuring that our values are as Americans get transmitted to the technology is very important.
Great. And you of course are a big supporter of the SESP AI Summit here, so thank you for your support. We were talking a little bit earlier about some of the conversations you had today. We're basically at the closing of day one. What's a hopeful takeaway from you for today? Not a specific discussion necessarily, but a hopeful takeaway from the many conversations you had. Before we came on stage, you were like, you need a water, your throat was so parched. So lots of discussions. Maybe you can share.
Well, I'm amazed at how much more excitement there is even this year. Like last year, it was amazing, but this year it is, there's this level of intensity about this. There's more seriousness about it. And you can see some of the ecosystem that Ili and his team have managed to actually bring in one place, this AI plus notion, which is very, very exciting to me. It creates a lot more diversity and I think excitement and cross-learning, which is incredible.
Chris, take us home.
This is an amazing event. If it ever turns into the Association of the United States Army that takes over like 4 blocks of this place, and you've got every prime contractor in the world, we're done. It has got to stay like, and I was just amazed with the agenda and the interaction. There's something really special going on here, and it's got to stay like, it can't be commodified because transformation is going to happen with small, hard-working technologists, and it's not going to come from the traditional major companies. Anybody know what my last book is? Come on, no. Anybody? Master Son.
That's right.
Because really, that's what
Art of War.
That's really what we're dealing with here, and that's why I think your tool really recognizes that the American way of war, which is like just punch you in the face over and over and over and over again until you quit, is not a war-winning strategy. An indirect approach in a regular warfare using artificial intelligence as the machine that allows us to plan, to put everything together, run scenarios, and then execute and then iterate fast is going to be the thing. And that's, at the end of the day, this guy's the one that we have to pay more attention to, but we should never, ever forget the nature of war, which the old Germans said.
Clausewitz. So I think that's a great place to leave off, and a great juxtaposition on the history. You've taken us through a great history lesson and reading lesson through the history of war and the new and future of war. So thank you so much. Please join me in thanking Dr. Roy and Secretary Miller for a great discussion.